I was a better reader last year than this year, and will be a better reader now than I will be next year, so bear with me. I'm going to start by reading the preface to the 37 Elegies, and I may call it a prelude before everything is done. I have been thinking lately of an essay I read many years ago, back when I was an undergraduate in college. The memory is caused, I am sure, by the relentless cycles of chemotherapy and recovery leading to yet more chemotherapy and yet another recovery, followed by, well, the cycles seem relentless. In the very first sentence of the myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus asserts, and then defends, the notion that there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes after. A week before I started chemotherapy, I was reminded of that essay and its fundamental question by 3 of my oncologists. I asked them a rather simple question: how long will I be on chemo? The answer, as long as you think you can take it, and as long as it's keeping the mass at or about the same size or shrinking it. To a very large extent, whether they have read Albert Camus or not, every cancer patient undergoing chemotherapy for indefinite periods of time must come to terms with Camus' question. To continue the devastating regimen of chemotherapy or to stop the cycles of near death and recovery. They may not consider themselves existentialists. Camus did not consider himself one. But their doctors offer them a clear choice, and at the risk of being overly dramatic, that choice is to live with the suffering that implies, or to stop some of the suffering and die. Let's for a moment revisit the actual myth of Sisyphus. He was indefatigable. He sinned often and joyously against the gods. And all of those sins and the accompanying joy are a part of the myth. But his great sin was having gained permission to leave the underworld, to return to his old life in order to chastise his wife. Why else would any of us want to leave the underworld? He refused to go back after enjoying the green earth for a while, the warmth of the sun. Pluto, enraged by this Sisyphusian behavior, dispatches Mercury to bring him back to where, as Camus writes, his stone awaits him. His stone awaits him. My stone awaits me. Your stone awaits you. It's a pretty conjugation, isn't it? Reminds me of that other statement about human suffering, that each of us has his own cross to bear. For Sisyphus is condemned to roll a huge stone up a high hill, and when he reaches the summit, to see the stone roll back down to the valley below, and then he starts over. Sisyphus walks back down the hill to begin the task again. Immediately we see correlations with our own lives and the lives of those around us. Cliches like the rat race, the old treadmill, and others all come to mind. It is when we become aware that we too are pushing that stone up the hill that we become what? Not tragic, perhaps pathetic. At the very least, aware of an existential question concerning whether it is worth it to continue or not. I got ahead of myself. Camus is concerned not with rolling the stone up the hill, though his description of that is brilliant, lyrical, but with those moments when Sisyphus sees the stone rolling back down the hill and begins to walk down. This is the moment Camus calls the absurd. That moment when we are not buried in the task, but have time to think about how meaningless it is. That moment of awareness, of consciousness about who and what we are, is the moment that makes both tragedy and pathos possible. Camus reminds us that for almost all of his life, until the final hours we see acted out on the stage, Oedipus walked blindly through life, happy, content in his wife and children, and then he ripped the veil away and entered the role of the tragic hero. There is a kind of joy in his triumph. His ripping the world apart to enable himself to see at this moment of blindness. He is not defeated. He is triumphant as he is led away by his daughter Antigone, a moment of apotheosis still to come. I don't want to belabor a much labored over point, but that moment of awareness also leads to what we now call an existential decision. Is life worth living? Excuse me. Is life worth living? At that moment, Oedipus decides that it is, as he talks to Theseus. "O Theseus, dear friend, only the gods can never age, the gods can never die. All else in the world, almighty time obliterates, crushes all to nothing. But he says life is worth living. Despite so many ordeals, my advanced age and the nobility of the soul make me conclude that all is well." And so we return to the beginning. How chemotherapy maintenance is similar to that integral question, salient to philosophy. The matter of suicide, the story of Sisyphus, the moment of the absurd, the moment of true self-awareness. Excuse me. Let's come down from the heights to the lower level existence of a chemotherapy maintenance patient, me. Chemotherapy comes in cycles. One day, IVs filled with chemicals designed to kill blood cells are infused into my body. The next day I feel good, but have to go back to the clinic to have a shot designed to help restore white blood cells. One day you kill the cells, the next day you bring them back. The next morning, I'm rolling stones up the hill, sick, exhausted, trudging on, falling asleep off and on. Not pain. I have felt no pain except for the insertion of IVs. For a week, I feel almost like answering yes to that essential philosophical question, but I resist. In the second week, the chemo stone rolls back down the hill and I can breathe again. I feel good. Enjoy driving around with the top down in my car. I go to work each day. It's only in the third week that the existential question arises. I feel normal. I play half a round of golf. I go to the club and walk on the treadmill, run a little. Damn, I'm fully human again. But the week moves on, and I am walking down a Sisyphusian hill. The huge stone grows larger in my sight. Monday will be chemo day, and the whole thing will start over once again. Do not get me wrong. I am no kind of hero. I am not Oedipus, not Sisyphus. I'm merely a person, one of billions, one of thousands undergoing this same treatment cycle. Ultimately, though, we all have to make the Sisyphusian choice to go on or not to go on. That is, I think, what Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot is all about. Gogo and Dee see no real purpose in their lives except to wait for Mr. Godot, who never appears. Let's go on, Dee says. And they do. Or they don't. Not heroes, just people like you and me. They go on, and I go on. We all have the option to stop. Beckett is positive, as are Oedipus and Sisyphus, as am I. I could not have written this last week when I had my most recent chemotherapy treatment. I would not have had the energy. I can't not write this week, even if it's not terribly interesting. As I said at the beginning, I first read Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus back when I was an undergraduate, some decades ago, perhaps 2 or 3 decades after Camus wrote it. I was 18 years old and besotted with the theater of the absurd and with French intellectuals. Camus' essay has held up over the years much better than I have. It remains for me essential reading. Essential? Yes, because it makes people think about things we really do not want to think about. Thank you. I'm going to read a few of the elegies now, and then I'm going to move to things more pleasant than what I have been reading about. This is Elegy 1. And so I come to it, unwilling, unprepared. I have written elegies in the past for others, have seen plants ripen and die, plowed under. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. No, not me. That is not what I meant at all. Love song as elegy. Lazarus returns, peach juice sliding down his cheek. Be cool, whatever. Listen to the Stones. Rock the Who, once more at a free concert. It takes shape. All. Once there was a moo cow, a great white whale, a raft floating down a slow-moving river, an old mother rocking a cradle. Screw it. Let's go out west to where the east begins. East side, west side, all around the town. The kids sing Ring a Rosie, London Bridge is falling down. And once upon a while I went to war Not a great war. Not a war to end all wars. Not a war to make the world safe for democracy. War as shrug, as yawn. Standing up takes it all out of you. Last breath, last glimmer of sight. Have I mentioned people? Those who mean so much? No, I don't think so. We pass them on highways, watch them cope or not. Do you remember Otis sitting on the dock of the bay? Janice yearning for a Mercedes-Benz? Not. A Beckett play, curtain rises, ash bins displayed, a baby cries, lights dim, the curtain falls. No action, no dialogue, no plot, just a scream over the ashes. I would say something real and true, perhaps in the sequel. Elegy 2. So many different ways to say it. A man drives down a country road, crashes into a ditch. A child watches the sunrise. An old man watches it set. Nothing unusual, not really. A train speeds west from Beaumont, stops in San Antonio, crosses deserts through Tucson to Oakland, where ships wait for a voyage farther west to the east. I went out to see the amazing Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield. He was Hap Lohman just a month earlier in New York, now swings between buildings. His uncle killed while he went through his private existential angst. The self-absorption of youth, the caring of the elderly, obsession in 3 dimensions, dark, not somehow satisfying. Spring, summer, autumn, winter pass. Rivers flow down to the sea, new trees spring up and are themselves replaced. Slow moving of the earth on its axis, circling a not too special star. Should we stand up and shout, try to call attention to ourselves, or merely be until that moment we are not? It's all really about the same. The third elegy. So violent. I was born during World War II, traveled each summer through the South to a beach in Panhandle, Florida. Saw too much, and yet, can we ever see enough? The muchness reinforces what we do, how we act. Once on a time, 2 boys took a boat, drifted out on the calm waters, and then swam to shore. Boat drifting away, blamed 2 other boys, African Americans. Confessed too late. Too much. I had not thought there could be so much. Our first war was this: getting together to form tribes, and then Korea, Africa, Vietnam, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and more. So much. Melville baptized his great book in nomine Diablo. What could not be just so? Jose y Maria, pray for us, if at all, in the small cracks in the concrete where weeds sprout and stretch up to the light. Pray. Pray for whatever you will pray. Nothing has changed. I'm going to read one of the interludes now. Yes. A few years ago, the English department gave me the opportunity to teach a course called Hero and Anti-Hero in British Literature. And I had no idea what to teach. British literature has lots of angry young men. It has nothing that relates very closely to the American version of the anti-hero. When I think of the American version, I think of James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, which is an allusion that probably passes most of you over. Or Tom Joad in The Grapes of Wrath. There are just so many. But in that year, I had the opportunity to teach one of my favorite books, accompanied by one of my favorite films, Billy Liar. The book was written by Keith Waterhouse, who also wrote the screenplay. Great book, great screenplay. I fell in love with Julie Crystal in that particular movie, just because she was walking down the street swinging her purse. And they had about 15 minutes of that. And that was enough to make me a fan of Julie Christie's for life. We had an art theater in Beaumont, Texas, that showed both mild pornography and a few real art films. I saw David and Lisa, Jules and Jim, La Dolce Vita, many other great films there. I particularly remember Billy Liar. His town in England reminded me so much of my town in southeast Texas. He is condemned to continue living there in spite of his big dreams. That reminds me of many of us. You see, there's a part of all of us that is Billy Fisher. We dream these dreams, then we wake up to crushing reality. Billy works in a funeral home and dreams of being a comedy writer and a novelist. Somehow, though, he never really gets around to writing anything except titles. He loses himself in his dreams, in his fantasy world. When I was very young, when I was 20 and a senior in college, my dream was to go to New York and work in the theater. How many people have similar dreams? But I was too cautious, too working class, a product of public housing, too much so like Billy to just chuck everything and go. Oh, I did go to New York that year, but I had a job teaching a high school waiting for me at the end of summer. I didn't work in the theater, though I did go to a few cattle calls and was offered a low-paying job by NBC, ushering at Radio City. That was at the end, though, of my New York summer, and I could not afford to live in Manhattan at the salary they offered. I could have lived somewhere else, maybe Far Rockaway, for a while. But I was the person I was, and not someone else. And my imagination could embrace Manhattan, but not the entirety of New York. So when my summer was over, I put away the hot dog buns. I was selling hot dogs at the World's Fair, and headed back to southeast Texas and the Big Thicket to teach English and drama to students not much younger than I was. I was able to tell them stories of Manhattan, and they were true stories. I talked about the Dixie Hotel where I lived with two other guys until they went back to Texas, and about my New York girlfriend Sharon. Everyone needs a New York girlfriend named Sharon. And I told them how I had stood on the stage at the Booth Theater and whispered Hamlet's soliloquies to an empty theater. The same day at the night, I saw Richard Burton play Hamlet in front of a real audience in that same theater. Dreams. They come back from time to time to haunt you. You wake up in the morning, rub your eyes because it all seems so real, as if you were really there again. The play you had written, the audience calling for the playwright, and poof, you're back to brushing your teeth and going in to teach. You're being Billy Fisher, even as you show the film of being Billy, telling Liz that yes, he will be on the train to London with her at midnight. Liz was Julie Christie. And you're being Billy Fisher, dashing off the train to get a drink before it pulls out of the station, and then watching the train, Julie Christie, and your dreams pull away from the platform as the train speeds away. And like Billy Fisher, you turn away, and you and your fantasies, your dreams, open the door of the house and go in. And then the movie ends. It does not, of course, have to end that way. Billy could be a bit braver, could stay in that train and go to London, could grasp the chance while he has it. So maybe he would fail. So what? He would not at least look back on that day for the rest of his life and regret not taking the risk. People do take that risk every day. But most of us, as Thoreau said, lead lives of quiet desperation. We do what is expected of us. I actually wrote that for my students at the end of that class as sort of a whip to try to spur their intent